Hello, in this tutorial we'll be looking at the content in Unit 3, Activity 2. And the title of this activity is The News. And it will focus on news articles, particularly news articles that we read, whether that be in a newspaper or whether that be online. And so to start with, you'll get a definition of what is the news, and we'll talk about how news can be delivered in a number of different ways. It can be delivered on paper in a newspaper or a magazine. That's sort of the traditional way of getting news. It can be delivered through the radio. It can be delivered on TV. And I think more and more it's becoming most popular on the internet. And so that's what we'll kind of look at in this activity, is we'll look at examples of news on the internet. So you'll find that maybe you'll say that you don't like to read the news, and I hear that a lot. I hear a lot of people say they don't read the news or they don't pay attention to the news, but I think the news pretty much has something for everyone. You might not care too much about politics, but maybe you pay attention to the sports news or the entertainment news, or maybe you like to pay attention to news in fashion. I mean, there's news in all sorts of different genres and different categories. And we'll take a look at that by looking at the example of the Windsor Star. And you can click on the Windsor Star here, and we'll look at an example of how a news organization presents itself. And you'll see that, for example, the Windsor Star website divides up their news into what they call just general news, sports, opinion, arts, business, and life. And actually, if you click on sections here, you'll see that they go down into even more detail. So whatever you are interested in, the news probably has something that you probably look at most days, even if it's just the weather. So I think the news is something that we can all kind of relate to, and we all take part in. So after we look at what is the news, we'll look at the structure of news, and we'll look at the different parts, particularly of a news article. And this will be really important right here. So you might want to take notes right here on the different parts of a news article. And so every news article needs a headline, a dateline, a byline, a photo, a caption, a lead, which is the first paragraph, body paragraphs, and some form of quotations. And so all of these, if you were to pick up any article in a newspaper or a magazine, or look at any sort of article, say again on the Windsor Star website here, you're going to find all of these different parts. And just to show you an example, you can click on a sample news article, and this is what you'll see. And this is an example of a recent Windsor Star article. So what I've done is I've just gone in, and in red, I've sort of documented the different parts of the news report. So you start with a headline, you have a byline, which is the author's name, you have a date line, which is the date that it was published, you have a photo and a caption explaining that photo, you have a lead paragraph, which tries to establish the most important part, the most important information right away. You have quotations from people that are involved in the story, and then you have a lot of little body paragraphs. Usually there's no concluding paragraph in a news report. It just kind of explains the information from most important to least important and then ends. And so you'll notice that it's different than other types of writing that we've done. It's not like a traditional paragraph. It's broken up into lots of small paragraphs. There's no indenting. And sometimes you'll even have paragraphs that are only one sentence, like, for example, this quotation here or this question. So this just gives you an idea of the different parts of a news report. You're going to have to write your own news report in this activity, so it's important that you understand the different parts. Okay. So if we go a little bit further, a news report tries to answer what are called the 5 W's: the who, what, where, when, and why. So every time you tell a sort of a news story, what you're trying to do is answer those questions. Who was involved in the event that you're reporting on? What happened? Where did it happen? When did it happen? and why did it happen? If you can answer those 5 questions, you have the basic parts, you have the basic material information that you need for a news report. And so here we have an example of a lead paragraph that establishes the 5 W's right away in the first sentence of what could be a news report here. So this is just an example. What you'll also need to understand is that news reports follow what's called the inverted pyramid structure. So you always start with the lead paragraph, which tries to establish as many of the 5 W's as possible. So the most important information goes in the first paragraph. And then you have the next most important facts and information, then lesser important facts and information, and then the least important facts and information. So it's a pyramid starting with most important and going downwards to least important. So when you organize your information in a news report, think of it that way. Think, what is the most important information that I have to give to the reader, and put that up top. There is an example here of the structure of a news report. And so if you go through this little activity here, it's going to talk about every picture tells a story. And they're going to go through the who, what, where, when, and why. And they're going to ask you to try to look at these 3 examples of photos, the cartoon pictures here, but we can consider them photos, and try to identify the who, what, where, when, and why for each one. And so you'll see the examples down here, and you can match them up with the photos. This just kind of gets you to think about those 5 W questions, so that when you write your own news report, you know how to gather the information. What else do we have? Also, quotations. News reports contain quotations. So they're not quotations like you would do in an academic paragraph or in an essay. They're usually direct quotes from witnesses or people that saw what happened that saw the event that you're writing the news report on. So, for example, there's an example here of a bank robbery. If a writer was to write a news article on a bank robbery, they probably would want to include a quotation from one of the bank tellers, with that bank teller saying out loud what they saw. And then they probably want to include a quotation from a police officer explaining how they arrested the suspect, right? So you would include usually at least 2 quotations in a news story from people that saw what happened. You can learn how to use quotation marks. There is another practice exercise here that will run through how to use quotation marks, and it will provide you... Oops, pardon me, I didn't turn the volume off there. But you'll find that they're going to provide you with some examples, and they're going to show you how to use quotation marks and how to use commas and punctuation when you use quotation marks as well too. So this is just a little practice with quotations. All right, the last part of this activity is about facts and opinions. When you write a news article, you should be sticking to facts. We're not writing opinions. Later in this semester, we'll get into opinion writing in a couple of different forms, but news articles should stick to the facts. So we've already discussed above here what a news article should look like in the different parts. Now let's look at what it should not include. So it should not be an advertisement for a product or service. That would not be factual. That would be opinionated. It should not be a personal story about the journalist's own life. That, again, would not be factual news. It should not just be a long interview with someone. It should be explaining what happened in an event. It should not have bias or prejudice. It should not contain the journalist's personal opinions. It should not have irrelevant information that does not relate to the news event. So a news article should be very specific. It should just be the facts on the event that happened. You don't want to be including opinions in any form. And so at the bottom of the activity, we just have a little explanation, a little definition and some examples of what is a fact, and a definition and some examples on what is an opinion. And a little practice here at the bottom, where it's going to ask you to look at 6 different statements here and identify whether they're facts or opinions. I think some of these are pretty obvious. I think a lot of students will think, well, I know what a fact is and I know what an opinion is. But when I see students write news articles, or when I see them write other types of writing when they're asked to not use their opinion, a lot of times they have problems and they don't realize it, but they go beyond facts and they start writing opinions. So we have to put ourselves in the mindset that we're not going to include our opinions. We're going to just report the facts. Once you have finished with the facts and opinion exercise here, you can move on to the assignment page. I would remind you that you are going to write your own news article in the assignment page, so make sure that you fully understand the content here and you know what a news article looks like.